So the topic for this conversation is what is advanced yoga. Why we thought of doing this video is because nowadays, especially in the studio scenario, like more in the cities, you see a lot of this division in yoga classes of beginner classes, intermediate classes, advanced classes. But just a very simple exposure to those classes will be very clear that in fact the division of beginner to advanced is more based on postures or physical capacity. In general, the beginner classes will be physical postures, physical movements that do not demand so much athletic performance, strength, flexibility, while the advanced classes will be the ones that have the postures that demand a little bit more capacity and exposure and practice. So the division between basic to advanced is pretty much on physical terms. Now I would like to argue here that traditionally speaking, and I'll say even in the real world, not just traditionally but in the present time, what actually is advanced yoga is meditation. Starting from a historical perspective, if you look into the yoga texts, the yoga traditions, the ones that maybe have some time on their shoulders, you always see that the progression of a good yoga practice, of a good yoga life, is from movement towards stillness. In the text, always as a person, as a practitioner goes along the pathway, it leads towards samadhi, it leads towards meditation. It's a still practice. So we can see, historically speaking, that the more advanced one is, the more one ends up in meditation. Even not only the yoga system, but if you get, for example, the Buddhist system, which share many similarities with classic yoga. I also see this idea that you start with training, for example, in ethics, moral behavior, relationship behavior, society behavior, the sila, the precepts, the ethic aspect of living, and then you move from that initial grounding that the ethics and the morality give to you. You move towards the practice of meditation, samadhi, of vipassana, and so on. So even in the Buddhist tradition, there is this perception of the practice moving from something that is more external towards something that is more internal, related to the mind itself. If you think of sitting for long periods of time, and I will even say like very long periods, but let's say 1 hour, 1 hour and a half or 2 hours, it's very unnatural for the body to be in a still position. It's much easier, for example, to go for a walk for 1 hour, or to do any sports or any exercise that you enjoy for 1 hour. So any action, movement with the body for 1 hour, then to sit still for 1 hour. I believe for most people, and from my experience working with people, for majority, really the majority, is almost seen as something impossible to sit still for one hour. Not even 20 minutes or 15 minutes for most people will be already a big challenge. So you see, even physically speaking, actually to stop is more difficult than to move. It's almost unnatural, although you can practice to do it. The meditation traditions have always developed primarily on the sitting posture. And the reason is the sitting position is in the middle between standing and activity or broader activity of the body, and lying down, which would be the posture of relaxation, full relaxation, and sleeping. So the sitting posture is the middle ground, and that's why most even of the statues of meditators, and even if you type yoga on Google, the main or the chief position, the symbol of that practice will be the sitting meditative posture. That is like the standard of those practices. It represents meditation. The reason is the sitting position lies in between too much effort, which would be to stand for a long time or to do any physical action for a long time, and full lying down, full relaxation, which would be too dull. So also the posture of sitting represents the mindset that is requested or necessary for meditation. That is some level of stillness, of being still, which we found, for example, lying down and resting, but you are sitting not to allow too much dullness or that downward tendency of the mind and of the body to relax too much and then fall into sleep. So you see that even the sitting position represents that stillness that is very conscious, that is very attentive, that is awake. for all the promises of these traditions, because if you're going to study yoga philosophy, if you're going to study Buddhist philosophy, you always see there's a lot of promises in these traditions, in these texts, in these practices. They promise things like peace of mind, they promise things such as really big changes or shifts in personality, and they even go up to promising things like enlightenment, nibbana, nirvana, kaivalya in the yoga tradition, which I'm not getting into in this conversation, but these are huge promises. And the pathway that will get you into those promises is not necessarily just doing more physical activity, but actually the meditation, because it's the moment you're going to deal directly with the mind. The mind is more complex than the body. Why? Is because the body is more obvious, the body is more clear. You can clearly see the body, you can clearly touch the body, you can feel that you're moving the body out of will. The mind is a little bit more tricky because you cannot grab it, you cannot touch it. You have an inference that it exists, but you cannot see the thought. You just know that it's happening. So it's much more complicated to deal with the mind than it is to deal with the body. The mind is not so obvious. That's why if you're planning to do an advanced practice, that is the practice of gearing towards directly to the mind itself, to the psyche, to the psychological realm. If you think, for example, even in terms of psychotherapy, like the Western therapeutic tradition for the mind, for psychology, it normally takes years if you're looking for major changes, because it's not easy to deal with the mind directly. And in the old days, they were also doing behavior changes like we do nowadays in psychology. They're also doing philosophy, so discussing things, rationalizing things, trying to find what's wrong and right by argumentation. But they also had this development of meditation, which is to deal with the mind directly, to see the mind, to learn how to find the mind, to see the mind and then to shift it or to understand it better. And that's the meditation tradition. And again, no wonder it's more advanced, because it's not so clear, it's not so obvious as it is the body. Now that being said, although I would say that meditation or direct mind application of effort is more advanced or more complicated, you have to start somewhere. And it's always better to start with something that is simpler than with something that is more complex. No wonder then in the yoga tradition, the starting point has become the body and the breath. The body, it tends to never lie. Even if you think, for example, of mental states or emotional states, let's say if you think when you're afraid, or if you think when you're anxious, or when you're sad, or when you're excited, or when you're very happy. Alright, so Blackie joined the conversation. Now, as I was saying, if you think of those emotional states, normally associated with the psyche, with psychological things. But actually, you know the difference between being afraid, being anxious, being excited, and so on. Not necessarily so much also, but not exactly only by the type of thoughts that you have, but because of the way the body feels. Anxiety feels slightly different than excitement. Worry feels slightly different than calmness on the physical level, on the body. So the reference we have to understand of how the mind is operating is actually via the body. By learning how to sense the body, you know then the mental state. You can access the mind as well via thoughts, by knowing what you're thinking, like the internal dialogues. But that can be tricky. The rational, the language aspects of the mind, they play tricks. Especially for very rational people. They can play several tricks on their mind and argue with themselves of what they're actually sensing or not, feeling or not, what is right or not. But the body doesn't lie. It's always very clear. If you consider, for example, people that are trained to find liars, let's say spies or government people, police, etc. You know, they'll normally be trained not to look into what the person is speaking, but by looking at the body language. If someone is saying something which is not true, there will be a tendency for that to be manifested in behaviors, patterns on the body, on the skin, on movement, on facial expressions, which reside on a little bit of an unconscious level. It's still part of the mind, but unconscious in the sense that that person cannot fully control it, although it's being manifested. So you see, the body is more direct. It's a primary source for understanding the mind, for seeing the mind. So no wonder on the pathway of advanced yoga, of meditation, from the yoga point of view, the yoga tradition, we access initially primarily through the body. And then by shifting or changing the behavior, the patterns of the body, you start to also implement changes on the mind, because one is correlated with the other. But for all the work you can do on your body, because especially nowadays in the yoga side, people tend to get very hooked on the body. So they start this pathway, which should lead towards meditation. They started dealing with the body, which is again a good idea, but they get hooked on the body because the body is nice, and especially if you start feeling better, physically speaking, more capable, you feel rejuvenated, you feel better because now you're dealing better with the physical structure of the body. There might be a tendency to get hooked on it. And then you see that happening in the yoga nowadays, that much of the pranayama, the breathing, like the deeper techniques of breathing, which leads towards meditation, and then the meditations themselves, and even the philosophical side of yoga has been left aside because the physical practice took over. We got enchanted by the body in the yoga tradition. We got hooked onto it. Although it should be seen as a stepping stone. You start by the body, you start through movement towards stillness, which should be then the breathing practice, and especially the meditation practice. But we got enchanted. One thing to remember about the body, and that's in the yoga philosophy tradition, in the Buddhist tradition, for whatever it is that we do with the body, whatever supplements you take, whatever exercise we do, as careful as we are to diet, etc., the body really has three tendencies, which are, so far at least, is unavoidable. That is aging. A consequence of aging and from living anyway is sickness, and then an ultimate consequence of sickness is dissolution of the body, which is a fancy way to say death. This is unescapable. That will come to the person that is an athlete, super healthy, super capable, super strong. That will come to the person that is bedridden, cannot do any form of exercise. It's unescapable. Although we have these fancy ideas nowadays of immortality and being forever young, and biohacking the body and all that, treating the body as if it is a computer, that you just change this chip and you put another one and everything will be okay. Although we have these fancy ideas, so far it didn't happen. So we are still, let's say, fated for those three things of aging, of sickness, and of death. That's why getting enchanted too much with the body, it's not 100% smart approach. Like thinking that just by dealing with the body alone, everything will be solved in the realm of the psyche, of the mind. Because you can't escape those three things. The mind has a tendency to be more fresh than the body. One way to understand this is a happy state when you're 10 years old and a happy state when you're 80 years old. Both are happy states. They are in some ways independent of the body. Peace, or a sense of space on the mind, a sense of clarity on the mind, they are independent of age, and even, I would argue, depending on the training of the person, independent of sickness. So people can be sick on the body and show great levels of clarity and great levels of... So there are many examples in history of people that didn't have bodies which were deemed as super capable, athletic, etc. Think of Stephen Hawking, for example. It's a modern reference for that. An incredible mind, very capable, still influential, but in a body that was completely invalid, right? He was not capable even of walking, even of speech. Towards certain points of his life, he was able to use anymore. So as you see, the mind, it can preserve certain qualities which the body can't, just by the fact of aging and by the fact of sickness. Therefore, using the body as a stepping stone towards reaching the mind in my opinion, is a very good approach of the yoga tradition because it's more broad. You access the mind via the body, or you learn to locate the mind, to sense the mind, to perceive it via the body, and then eventually start the work of the mind itself, leading towards preserving certain states of mind that are ideal. It should be like the enlightened state, a mind that is purified, a mind that is tranquil, a mind that is peaceful, a mind that doesn't have a tendency for selfishness, and so on. All those are in a way independent of age. They can be done at any point, at any year. The Buddha himself had pain, which is quite interesting if you read the tradition of the classic texts. The Buddha, by the time he was already a little bit older, those days they used to travel by foot, that was a long time ago. So sometimes in some of the texts he says that he needs to take a rest after a long walk, he needs to lie down because his back is hurting. The Buddha had a personal physician, an Ayurveda physician, because sometimes you get sick, you have like maybe digestive issues. Again, he might have a back pain from too much walking. So you see the body, even for a mind or a person like the Buddha, couldn't escape the naturality of sickness, of pain, of discomfort. But capacities of the mind could be kept. So he could deal with that experience of pain or that discomfort with the body with a mind that was strong enough not to allow that to become more of a problem than what it is, or to see it as unnatural, for example. And you have other examples of what would be like saints or sages in history, which show exactly this trend, let's say, of not necessarily having athletic bodies, but having incredible minds. So again, I think it shows the prominence and the appeal of mind work over body work. Although having two would be in my opinion, the perfect scenario, and that would be the yoga tradition in a nutshell. One last point that I think is worth to mention is, if there's one message of the ancient, is that there are some hidden treasures or hidden capacities in the human mind. And I say in the mind because it's more about the mind than the body. Normally in the traditions they speak that those hidden capacities or those special features of a human are more accessed or related to the psyche. So they come to fruition via meditation, via mental training. So they're not so much related to physical capacities. These hidden features, which are accessed via advanced practice, or let's say meditation, they, according to tradition, they provide a lot of meaning to existence. They show why being a human is good, or why being a human is special. So for nowadays, that a lot of people are having these issues with meaning. There's a lot of, go on the internet and type meaning, there'll be plenty of videos of people discussing meaning, how to find meaning again in life and so on. Now that so many standard supports that we used to have in culture and society are kind of crumbling. One issue, on my perspective, is that a lot of these discussions of meaning, they are still done in a very rational level. So they are argumentative. Like whoever gets the better argument then wins. But the ancient way of finding meaning was more related to an exploration of the psyche itself. Like, what is it that's looking for meaning? What is it that is not allowing me to be at ease? Irrespective of society or other people or relationships and so on, but what's the seed that is causing this discomfort or this search? Those are normally the places you look upon onto, which is the mind itself, which is the psyche itself. And according to this tradition, if you progress in this practice, if you further this advanced practice of meditation, the meaning will reveal itself to you, it become clear. A classic way that some of my teachers would talk about meditation or fruition on the yoga path is that you basically clean the house. So imagine your existence it's like a room. So you have this combination of body and mind, and initially you start cleaning the house. So that will be mainly related to the body. So you start to clean the body from the patterns that are preventing you from having a good existence. And you progress from this cleansing of the body towards cleansing of the mind, so patterns of thinking, patterns of seeing that again are disrupting this good experience of living. And once you clear everything, there will be that state of easiness or that state of calmness. And then once that state, that room is cleansed enough, then you just sit and wait for the guest to come. And that guest is this revelation of meaning, or this revelation of the inner nature of existence, of the human. So you see, the pathway is really a path of cleansing, and then you wait. And that waiting is the stillness, is the sitting. And this cleansing manifests in the capacity of sitting. For you to be able to sit still for 1 hour, 2 hours, or even for 30 minutes, everything has to be at ease in terms of the body, in terms of the psychic, of the mind. You have to be fine, and then you can sit still. Now once you're sitting still, you wait. And then meditation will unfold itself, and then the meaning will arise from itself, from the mind, from the self, or from nature, any way that you prefer to speak of it. But it will come. But everything has to come to the point of stillness, which is a representative of the point of peace, of pacification, of easiness with existence.